Good afternoon. I'm Carl Lund. I work as a senior researcher on the Norwegian Institute of Public Health. I've been in tobacco control and tobacco behavior research for about 37 years. And the last couple of years, I've been vice president of SCOHRE, which is the organizer of this webinar this afternoon. And SCOHRE is an international scientific association of independent experts on smoking control and harm reduction who seek an open and constructive dialogue to help come up with a supplementary approach to smoking control policies. So in SCOHRE, we believe that smoking control strategies should adopt a supplementary element of tobacco harm reduction in addition to the traditional smoking cessation and smoking prevention measures. So we believe that the burden of smoking-related disease is too big for potential solutions such as e-cigarettes and snus and other non-combustible nicotine products to be ignored. We believe that these products could be part of the solution to the enormous smoking problem more than being part of the problem itself. So the purpose for SCOHRE is to provide policymakers with science-based, balanced information on tobacco harm reduction without degrading the traditional means and methods of smoking control. Now, in today's webinar, which is the third, I believe, within the last 12 months to be organized by SCOHRE, we will focus on the tried and tested method in smoking cessation or behavioral change, and not so much on tobacco harm reduction and e-cigarettes. And the title is How to Help People Change Their Behavior, a crash course on potential tools for smoking cessation. And our distinguished speaker is Professor Koula Asimakopoulou of Oxford Brookes University in the UK. I have had a brief glimpse of Koula's slides, and I think she will be addressing common barriers that get in the way when people attempt to undertake health-related behavior change. So her presentation looks very promising indeed. And before I give you the mic, Koula, just some background information on you. Koula is a professor of health psychology at Oxford Brookes University, where she also is associate dean of research. She is also visiting professor of King's College in London. And she has specialized in cognitive behavior therapy and motivational interviewing techniques. Koula has published over 120 scientific research papers, and she's a frequent presenter at scientific conferences, and she has a very high media profile, advising on issues about behavior change. And I think she's also extremely busy. Only this week she'll be holding 3 talks, so we're very fortunate to have security for this webinar, Koula. So without further delay, I give the mic to you, and yeah, please go ahead, Koula.
Yeah, well, thank you for this wonderful introduction and the very, very kind words. Yes, so I'm delighted to be here. So very many thanks to SCOHRE for inviting me to come and talk to you guys about behavior change. And also very many thanks to Oxford Brookes University for giving me the time and the space to actually think about the topic and actually pull a presentation together. So I should say that this talk came by from me having attended the Congress in Athens in September, where I saw some really, really exciting work being presented along the topics that Carl just talked about. And what struck me back then was that all those areas could really benefit by us thinking about behavioral science helping behavior change, helping healthcare professionals and helping consumers and patients on their journey towards change. And what that change looks like, whether it's smoking cessation, it's complete abstinence, it's something different, that is not particularly important or on focus today. What I'm more interested in is presenting you with tools that I'm hoping you might find useful in taking your patients, consumers on a journey of wherever it is that they want to go. So I am going to try and move my slides, she says. Here we go. Yes. So by the end of this webinar, then we would have tackled 3 things. I will have told you about behavior and evidence methods to support behavior change, as it says there in the orange box. But before we get to that, what I'd like us to think a little bit about is why is it that people might struggle with behavior change? Because there's no point really in thinking about tools if you already have the solutions. If you know how to change behavior, then you're about to waste 60 minutes of your life listening to me. So what I thought I might do is tell you a little bit about why some people find behavior change a difficult thing to do. And then I'm going to touch on limitations of 2 of the most commonly used behavior change techniques. And then I'm going to give you the tools just as I promised. So what is behavior change about? What is it and what isn't it? And as I alluded a minute ago, it is whatever the patient stroke consumer wants it to be. So from my philosophy of care, I don't see my role as a health psychologist in making people do what people do not want to do. Indeed, life for a psychologist would be very difficult if we were tasked with making people do things that they didn't really want to do. So we can only help people go where people want to go. So behavior change is about supporting patients and consumers to engage with change that they find meaningful and helpful for them. So for the duration of this talk, when I talk about behavior change, I mean whatever behavior change is meaningful for that particular person. And behavior change is about helping people drop an unhealthy behavior and pick up a healthier option. Generally speaking, that's what health psychologists are interested in. So we research ways of doing this in the most effective way. That's one side of the story. And then on the other side of the story, when we think about behavior change in clinic, and I should say that in addition to being an academic working at the university, I also help people within a clinical setting. So I have a practice where I advise on behavior change. The way that some healthcare professionals see behavior change and talk about it is somewhat different. So when some healthcare professionals talk about behavior change, we tend to talk about the non-compliant person, the difficult patient, the patient who comes and sees us and talks to us and listens to us, and then they go off and they don't do what they have agreed to do, or they don't do what we think they should do, or they don't do what we have agreed that they should do. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there between behavior change as something that is good for people and they readily engage with, and the view that some healthcare professionals have in terms of the non-compliant, non-adherent patient. And I must say to you that this is not really new. I'm not telling you anything new here. This idea that people are non-compliant, non-adherent has been around for very, very many years. And this is just an extract from the French playwright Molière having a conversation with the king, where the king says, well, you have a physician, what does he do? And Molière says, well, we converse, we have a discussion. He gives me advice, which I do not follow, and then I get better. So patients have views about advice that healthcare professionals give them about their health. Healthcare professionals have advice and views about patients. And it's all about pulling the two together, really, and hoping that the interaction is a fruitful one so that behavior change towards a healthier life takes place for the patient. So first of all, then, let's look at why some people find behavior change difficult. And I could accept the point that actually not all behavior change is difficult, but a lot of what we ask patients to do can be. It's not straightforward, otherwise we wouldn't be here today. Everybody would have given up all their unhealthy habits. Everybody would be much healthier. Everybody would be the right weight. No one would be drinking too much, smoking, and so on. So it's evident that a lot of people find behavior change difficult. So why is it? Why is behavior change difficult? And what I'm going to do next is just give you examples that demonstrate this. I'm not going to give you the full list of all difficulties to do with behavior change. So the most obvious reason why some patients might find behavior change difficult is because sometimes as healthcare professionals, we give out messages that fail to grab the person we have in front of us. And I should thank Susan Mickey for this idea of this slide here. Susan Mickey is a professor of health psychology at UCL in London. Because what she demonstrated here was how marketing and the car industry go about trying to change our behavior. And if you look at those two ads, what they're both trying to do is change your behavior and get you to part with a significant amount of money and buy a new car. But I'm sure you will see that the messaging that they adopt is really different and will appeal to a different sort of person. So the first ad will appear probably to a very different sort of person to the one that the second ad appeals. And it's the same in healthcare. There is no one size fits all in terms of communication with patients. There is no magic button we can press to get patients to do what patients need to do. And matching our communication style with what the patient needs and wants is paramount, is really, really important. And whenever I say this in conferences, people will say, well, but how do we do that? How do we know, Koula? How do we know what patients want and need? Well, we ask them. We talk to them, we get to know them, we spend time with them, then we know. It shouldn't be a guessing game and it shouldn't be rocket science. It should be fairly easy to actually talk to our patients and say, has this landed? What do you think of this message? Did you understand it? Would you rather I spoke to you in a different way? Would you rather we use our consultations differently? It's an equal partnership, right? We have the science and the knowledge, but they have their lives. And it's about equal people coming together to sort out a difficult health problem. So the first thing then that might make behavior change difficult is that we as healthcare professionals haven't quite got it right in terms of communicating the right message to the right person at the right time in the right way. A second issue that can get in the way is memory. Now, if you're anything like me, you won't remember what you had for breakfast earlier today, although you're probably sure you had breakfast. So a lot of the time, a lot of people forget a lot of what gets said to them. And that is particularly the case for healthcare consultations. So it was back in the late 70s that Lay showed that about 50% of what we say to patients in consultations gets forgotten. They don't remember it. And that is widely demonstrated. It's widely accepted in the health psychology literature that a lot of what you say to people in that limited context will get forgotten. And here I've given you a bit of a summary of a study that my team did back in, a long time ago now, in 2013, in dentistry. And what we actually wanted to find out there was what is it that people actually remember? So we know they forget a lot, but what is it that they actually remember? And what we did was we tape recorded consultations between dentists and patients. And then at the end of the consultation, we asked both the patient and the dentist to tell us the answers to those 4 questions. So what brought you to the dentist today? Or the dentist was asked, why did this patient come to see you? What did the dentist do? The dentist was asked, what did you do to the patient? What was agreed and what advice do you need to follow? And what we found was that obviously dentists remember more than patients because dentists controlled the consultation, so it's natural that they would remember more. But interestingly, patients remembered the past. They remembered what brought them to the dentist, and they remembered quite a lot of detail of what the dentist did. But when it came to the future, what actions were agreed once the person had left the surgery, they didn't remember that at all. Or indeed, they didn't remember any advice they had been given. So the assumption when we talk to people is that the message will get encoded and they will remember it and they will act on it. But hopefully you can see there are lots of opportunities there for the message to just leak, to just disappear. So memory is going to get in the way of behavior change. A lot of the time, patients don't actually remember a lot of what we tell them. A third issue is habits. Now, habits are things that we do without much thinking. So they're automatic behaviors that we do frequently that are persistent and we just emit without really having to really think long and hard. So that's what it is in everyday language. In health psychology, we tend to see habits as slightly different. So we talk about habits in terms of automatic behaviors that are activated, that take place once there is a cue present. So something happens and then the person gets activated to behave in a particular way. For example, a smoker goes into the pub, they see other people having a drink, they don't particularly want to drink, but they really want to have a cigarette, so they pop out again to have a cigarette. If you're in the UK, where you cannot smoke in pubs. So a habit then is a behavior that happens all the time, and it happens in response to a cue. So say the cue was, it's Friday evening, it's 6 o'clock, I have a glass of red wine on a Friday at 6 o'clock. The behavior is, I have a glass of red wine and I feel relaxed, and the reward is, all the troubles of the week disappear after a glass of red wine. What am I going to do again the following Friday at 6 o'clock? Well, when it's 6 o'clock, that's my cue. My behavior, which is now automatic, will be, it's 1 o'clock. And then the reward is, we feel relaxed. And this is the process through which habits develop. You need a cue, you need a behavior, you need something good to happen. That's good, apart from when you try and break a habit. Because if the cue is, it's Friday evening, the behavior is, I go out and have a smoke with my friends, and the reward is, I feel really relaxed, and you want to break that sequence, then what you need to do is find a behavior that leads to a similar reward. And that is where the difficulty is with smoking, that the rewards that people get from smoking are quite difficult to replace. So you could say to a health conscious person, well, look, it's Friday night, that's your cue. The behavior now needs to be, you'll go to the gym instead and you'll be much healthier. Where unless they experience the increase in their heart rate on the treadmill as equally rewarding as the smoking or the drinking a glass of wine, they're not going to engage with that behavior. And that's not because they don't know how to run on a treadmill or they don't know where the treadmill is at the gym. It's because the cue behavior reward, the habit that is already existing there, hasn't gone away. That needs to be broken and be replaced by the new behavior. And that's where new behaviors fail, in that the old habits interfere with this new behavior that we're trying to establish. And there's a myth. There's a myth that if you do something repeatedly for 21 days, then that's your new habit. So all you have to do is do a behavior for 3 weeks, and then, hey, pesto, you'll then just do it. Well, that's nonsense, unfortunately. And Ben Gardner, who is now at the University of Surrey, has very beautifully demonstrated that actually, and very sadly, it doesn't just take 21 days to form a new habit. Indeed, the range is between 18 to 254 days. So that's how long it takes for a new behavior to become automatic, so people don't have to really think about doing it. And where within the range between 18 and 254 days the person falls has to do with the person themselves, but also the complexity of the behavior. So the more complex the behavior, the longer the time frame that it will take for the habit to form. So 21 days is a myth, I'm afraid, and one that we need to retire. So in this next bit, what I'd like you to do is show you this idea of habits and just how difficult it is to break them. So for this one, I'm going to ask Carl to come and do a practical demonstration with us. There he is. So what I'm going to do, Carl, is I'm going to get my phone to come on, and I'm going to time you in the next slide. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask Carl to read the ink color that these words appear in. So are you ready, Carl? Ready?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Go.
So blue, green, red, yellow, green, red, blue, green, blue, red, yellow, red, yellow, green, red, blue, yellow, green, blue, yellow, green, green, red, yellow, green, blue, red, yellow, blue, red.
Excellent. Well done.
Thank you.
Carl has beautifully demonstrated that he can read the ink color of words that appear on his screen. And he did that beautifully in 15 seconds. Okay. Well done. So
Thank
for
you.
the next slide, Carl, I'd like you to do exactly the same thing. So look at the ink color that the words appear in and just read out the ink color, okay? And I'm going to get my stopwatch again to, oh, hold on if I can get it all. Go, reset. Right, here we go. Ready? Go.
I think so. Blue, green, red, blue, green, green, blue, yellow, red, green, red, yellow, green, blue, blue, yellow, blue, green, red, yellow, yellow, red, red, yellow, blue, blue, green, blue, red, yellow.
Excellent. Thank you, Carl. You took 38 seconds to do that. Now, that is not because Carl has forgotten how to read the ink color of words that appear on his screen, but it's because the process of reading words for meaning is automatic to adults. Okay, we have been socialized to read words for meaning, and we have done this for a very long time, probably longer than 254 days. So that is the automatic response. That's the habit. Reading the ink color of words is not habitual. And that is why Carl took much longer in this second slide to read the ink color of the words, because there was a conflict. There was a conflict between his natural, his habitual response, which would be to read the words for meaning, and what I was asking him to do, which was to read the ink color that the words appeared in. So hopefully you will see, in a fairly easy experiment, how important automaticity is in our lives and how it can get in the way when we try to do something new or something different. And then the final thing that gets in the way is unrealistic optimism. This is my top favorite. And this is a psychological phenomenon where most people think that bad things are more likely to happen to other people other than to us. And it's widely demonstrated, all over the world, all ages, all genders. When you ask people to compare themselves to the average other person of the same age and the same gender and say, how likely is it that bad things are going to happen to you compared to these other people? Most people say, bad things are more likely to happen to others, not to me. And here you've got a snapshot from a study we did during COVID. We did this all over Europe, Australia, and the States. And we asked people in the early stages of COVID, so early 2019, where there was no testing, there were no screening tests, there was no vaccine. We're all coming to lockdown in the UK at the time. We asked people to say, well, how likely is it that you will have accidentally infected others next month, that you will get infected next month, or you will have accidentally infected others the previous month? And that is compared to the average other person of the same age and gender. And you will see on your screen how everybody thought, well, actually, it's really, really unlikely that we will have done any of these things. Other people are more likely to suffer from those behaviors. So unrealistic optimism is a belief that bad things, to include lung cancer, to include other horrible diseases that might arise from smoking, are more likely to happen to other smokers other than to the person themselves. So 3 reasons why behavior change is difficult. Because sometimes the message doesn't land, because habits are going to get in the way, and then because unrealistic beliefs about risk come in to interfere with play. So what do we do in response then? What do most healthcare professionals do when we try and help people change their behavior? Where the 2 top go-to methods that we use are the ones I'm going to talk to you about first. Most people try and do, firstly, information giving. So when someone comes into us and we want to help them change their behavior, the first thing that most healthcare professionals do, yours truly included, I'm as guilty of this as everybody, is to give them information. We tell them why the behavior is really bad for them, how if they dropped it, things would get better, how the mechanics of disease and health and illness. And these are just some of the leaflets that are lurking around that some people use in order to give people information. So we might talk to people, we might give them a leaflet, we might show them a video, we might show them the stats, we might show them some graphs, but generally our go-to natural response is we give people information. So I'm going to give you some information because I know you all like information and science and data. So this is a paper I picked up from the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. And that is fascinating because what they've done is they've looked at people who had never run a marathon, and they looked at them training for a marathon, and then they looked at what happened to their bodies when they had trained for and run this marathon. Absolutely fascinating study. And what you'll see there is that actually training for a marathon is really, really good for you. So if you do that, you get a 4-year reduction in vascular age. And that is particularly the case if you're older. I can't quite believe they say older is older than 37 years. I will take issue with that, but there we are. So not as young as, I should say, 37 years. So older than 37 years and slower male people really benefited from running a marathon. So the message from this is preparing to run a marathon is really good for your health. You will live longer if you do that. Now you know that. How many of us are going to go and train for a marathon starting tomorrow? I very much doubt many in this webinar will actually do that. And yet here I am. I'm a professor of health psychology. I've given you one of the top studies in a top journal. I've given you information, and yet you're unlikely to go away and change your behavior. And yet when we talk to patients, we give them information and we expect them to go away and change. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? So we wouldn't go off and run a marathon tomorrow. Some of you might, but I know I won't. Yet we expect that change to happen from patients. And we now know that for any behavior change to happen, it's not enough to give people information. Information impacts their capability to engage with the behavior. So if I know that running a marathon is good for me, I've got this knowledge, I now have the capability, the psychological capability to process this information. But that is not enough. And the COMBI model proposed by Mickey Mastrallen and West a long time ago now is influential in our thinking. And what it suggests is that if you want behavior change to happen, it's not enough to just tackle one of those boxes. You need to tackle all 3 of them. So people need to be able to engage with the behavior. So I need to know how long a marathon is. I need to know that it's good for me. I need to have some running shoes, and I need to know the way to go and then come back. I need to have the opportunity to do it. So I need to not have to come into work tomorrow in order to run my marathon. And then I need to be motivated to do it. And this is the tricky bit. This is where most behavior change interventions fail, because although we're very good at tackling capability and opportunity, we're not very good at tackling patient motivation. So this is where I hope that the tools I'm going to show you are going to come in and help. And in tackling capability, opportunity, and motivation, health psychologists have spent a long time pulling together all the different things we can do with people to help them change. And they appear in a paper that is known as the Behavior Change Technique Taxonomy, version 1. There are other versions, but this is the kind of original one, where what we have there is a collection of 93 different techniques we can do to change a particular behavior. And different behaviors lend themselves to different techniques. It's not in one size fits all, and that's where you need a behavioral scientist to come and tell you which techniques work for which behaviors. But there are tools out there that are much better than just giving people information that will help address their capability, opportunity, and motivation, and then get them to change. The second popular behavior change method is to increase people's fear. So often inadvertently, we tend to give people risk information, disease information in such a way where we think that if they get shaken a little bit, if they get a bit worried about what we're talking about, then they might go and change their behavior. Normally, this follows several unsuccessful attempts of giving people information and then not changing their behavior. I can tell you now what I told the BMJ back in 2014, fear campaigns don't work. They don't work. That was Jane Spade, Chas Skinner and myself wrote to the BMJ. That was shortly after Diabetes UK had launched this campaign to try and frighten people into going to be tested for diabetes. They don't work. Fear campaigns do not work. We have good theory, good science that shows that they don't actually work. Yet people use it. They use fear campaigns, especially in this area. And there's some evidence to suggest that some people pay attention to the message and they do get unduly frightened. But if you think about it, if you scare people, this is what you increase. You increase their fear. You don't change their behavior. That's a separate thing. So if you give a fear campaign, that will, if it's successful, it will increase fear, because that's what you're tackling. You're tackling fear. You're tackling an emotional response. But emitting a behavior or not is quite different. It may be influenced by fear, but it's something completely different. So fear campaigns don't generally work. And the reason why they don't work is because people respond to them differently. So some people, when you try and frighten them into changing their behavior, will say, well, I'll be dead tomorrow. They've said smoking is bad for me. I'll be dead. So, well, I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time. So I shall smoke, and I don't particularly care what my healthcare professional says. So that's one group of people. And then there's the other group of people who will tell you how their granny smoked 30 a day and she lived to be 96. And they have good genes from granny. Therefore, it's not going to happen to them. Right? It's going to happen to all the other smokers, but not to them. And then you've got a third group of people who will pay attention to the message. And this is a study from 2022 where they looked at how showing graphic warning labels on cigarette packets change people's behavior. And what they did was they just hid the cigarette packets. They didn't actually smoke less, and the 12-month smoking behavior did not actually change. And that is not surprising, because if you scare people, you will make them frightened. If you're really good at your fear campaign, they will get very scared. But then they work to deal with the fear. They don't work to deal with the behavior that you want them to change. So fear campaigns generally don't work. So these are the things, though, however, that we do in practice. So a lot of the time we give people information. Information increases their knowledge, but as you've demonstrated, unless you all go off to run a marathon tomorrow, knowledge is necessary, but it's not actually sufficient to change behavior. And then fear campaigns might scare people, but scared people don't necessarily do what we ask them to do. So I'll be proposing to you that we don't do that anymore. We don't just give people information, we don't just frighten them. We use behavior change techniques that I've shown you already to perhaps tackle capability, opportunity, and motivation. And if we don't do that, we use other tools, which are also evidence methods to support behavior change. And I'm going to talk to you about 3 today, but I'm going to come to those in a minute. Because the reason that I'm interested in behavior change with people is because I genuinely think people can change. And those that don't change is possibly because that they don't really want to change, but also a lot of the responsibility lies on us as healthcare professionals in not acknowledging how we need to go in and help people change. And what I wanted to share with you here was this idea that people come to us, they come to us as healthcare professionals, not just, blank kind of slates. They come with beliefs and thoughts about health and disease. And I think that's really, really good, because beliefs and thoughts and feelings can change. They're malleable. And where there is a way in to change them, then healthcare professionals can have an impact on people's lives. This is my top favorite study. This was done by Jane Ogden and Amelia Hollywood down at the University of Surrey. some time ago. And what they were interested in was orlistat. So orlistat, as you know, is the medication that people take to help them with weight loss. And what they did was they assessed people's beliefs about obesity and about the role of medication in losing weight at the beginning of the study and then 6 months later. And at the beginning of the study, what they found was that the any improvement in BMI was actually predicted by people endorsing a medical solution to the weight problem. So people who believed that orlistat was going to be helpful in them losing weight lost more weight than people who didn't think that orlistat was an effective means of helping people lose weight. It's not exactly surprising or rocket science, right? If you believe in the medication, you take it, you follow the instructions, you lose weight. If you don't, you don't. Interestingly, though, and this is the fascinating thing, was that a decrease in BMI, so more weight loss over 6 months, was predicted by a decrease in endorsing a medical solution to people's weight problem. So what actually happened was that whilst people, at the beginning when they started the study, they believed in orlistat, but as they started losing weight, they then started believing that it was them, it was personal agency and perseverance and change in unhealthy eating that actually helped them lose the weight. So people's beliefs about the medication and their role in changing behavior changed as they interacted with the medication. And that is absolutely brilliant for psychologists, because we know that as beliefs change, we can influence them, we can shape them, we can work with people to bring about change that is actually helpful to them. And that is very exciting because we can actually intervene. So what I'm going to talk to you about is 3 tools that we can use to influence beliefs and support people on their journeys towards tackling beliefs, tackling what they think about smoking and smoking cessation, and then smoking cessation following as a result. So these are 3 evidenced methods. They appear in the US Department of Health and Human Services Centers for Disease Control and Prevention as the go-to techniques. I should say they are on top of what I've talked to you about already. So behavior change techniques are your kind of really first port of call, go to. Pretty much any psychologist should be able to help you with that. These are kind of more sophisticated, more you will need to be trained in those in order to be able to deliver them. But what I want to do today is just give you a flavor of what they look like and what they sound like. And then if you're interested in this, then we can talk again about how you might implement them in your practice. So cognitive behavioral therapy is the first one, and you can tell from the accent and the name I'm Greek, so I have to have something from my ancestors in the presentation. So good old Epictetus said that men, although I'm sure he also meant women, are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them. So it's not stuff that happens that makes us feel anxious, depressed, unhappy, unsettled, but it's the commentary, it's the interpretation that we put on things that happen to us that then lead us to become unhappy and stressed and then go off and, for example, engage in unhealthy behaviors. So the premise behind CBT is that it's not the stuff that happens over which we may or may not have control that influences behavior, but stuff happens, we then interpret the things that happen in a particular way, then we emit a particular behavior which may or may not be helpful. So for example, if I go to the pub and I see all my friends drinking excessively, it's not the going to the pub and seeing them drinking excessively that might make me think, oh, I better fit in with that. It's my need for wanting to fit with other people, my rule that says I must fit with other people, I mustn't be the odd one out, that actually will motivate the behavior to, for example, drink as much as they do. So it's not the going to the pub or my friends, it's what my head tells me about the particular situation that leads the behavior. So CBT can help people essentially look at the situation, look at things that happen, and simply interpret it from a different lens. And what I thought I might do is demonstrate this here. This is a visual illusion. We use this a lot in psychology to simply show how brains are really flexible and malleable. And if you look at the image long enough, you should be able to see two images. You should be able to see a young woman looking away from your screen towards the back, and she's got a white feather on her head. She's got black hair. She's got a white kind of headscarf, and she's got a fair black fur in front of her. So kind of, there she is. There's her eye, there's her nose, there's her jaw, there's her neck, there's the feather I talked to you about. And she looks away. And at the same time, if you keep looking at the image, you will also see an older woman looking down. So you'll see there's a big, thick nose. There's her eye with a wrinkle. There's her half-open mouth. There's her jaw there. And again, she's got black hair and a white scarf. It might take a bit of time to see it. Once you've seen both images, you won't be able to ever unsee them. You'll know this is what you actually see. And yet, what's actually happening here is there's just a pattern of black and white lines. This is what's actually going into our brain and what our brain is invited to process. And which image you see first will probably depend on your experiences. You'll have a preference for it, but once you see the one and then you get guided through seeing the other, you probably will be able to see it. I'm saying, hoping that you can see both images. Most people can see them both. So it's black and white lines, yet the brain interprets this as a young woman as opposed to an old woman. And that's what CBT suggests. It says that things happen, activating events happen to us, and most of the time we think things happen and they lead to consequences. So A leads to C. But what we now know is wrong with this way of thinking is that things don't just happen, they lead to consequences, because the alphabet doesn't go from A to C, it goes from A to B to C. And what actually happens is activating events happen, then those events activate our beliefs about ourselves and about the world and about the situation, about the A, and those beliefs may or may not be helpful. And then it's those beliefs that lead to the consequences. They lead to us to behave in a particular way and be sad, happy, ecstatic, have a cigarette, not have a cigarette, talk to people, not talk to people, and so on. So the ABC of CBT, the basic premise of CBT is that stuff happens, but it doesn't actually lead to consequences. It activates people's thoughts about the world and the stuff that happens, and those beliefs may be helpful or unhelpful to people. So what CBT does is it works with a person to help them question those beliefs and challenge them in terms of how accurate they are and how helpful they are. So for example, if you imagine a situation where A is the activating event, person goes to the pub, C is everybody, all their friends are standing outside the pub smoking. If the belief that gets activated is I need to fit in with people, then that person is more likely to go and join their friends and smoke. If the belief that gets activated is I used to be that person, but I no longer identify as a smoker, then that person will be more likely to be able to go past their friends and go in the pub and meet them later on when they have finished having a cigarette. And all that's changing here to predict that behavior, whether the person joins in the friends with smoking or goes to the pub, is the belief, is the underlying belief about the situation that they're in. So psychologists can work with people to help them question those beliefs and tackle them and challenge them and question how helpful they are. And in doing that, we point out unhelpful thinking habits. These are universal. Everybody at some point in their lives engages in those unhelpful thinking habits. And those unhelpful thinking habits are those that are likely to make people engage in the unhealthy behavior. So when you know what the unhelpful thinking habits are, you can then work with the person to challenge them, decide not to engage with them, decide to do something different. So CBT then works on thoughts and what people make of a particular situation, their beliefs, and invites them to challenge them and consider whether holding on to those beliefs is actually helpful for them. And if it isn't, then you work with a person to change those beliefs. So that's CBT. Tried and tested, a really effective way of changing behavior. The second one I'm going to talk to you about is acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. This is also known as a third wave CBT technique. So it arises from CBT, but it's the new kid on the block. It's more modern. It's a new method. And acceptance and commitment therapy stands on the premise that our minds have evolved to look out for danger and protect us from danger. So we're all here because our heads have gone da 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 all our lives, keeping us safe from harm. So we're about to cross the road. Our head goes, "Don't cross the road. There's a bus coming." So we don't walk in front of the bus. Our head says, "Don't shout at the teacher, be good at school," and then we do well at school and go to university and become scientists. So generally we have evolved minds that look out for us. They look out to protect us from harm. But in doing that, two things happen. One, we tend to trust the stories that our heads tell us all the time, so we don't question them because, it's our own minds. We won't question our minds now, would we? We know we're right all of the time. And the second thing that happens is those stories sometimes are unhelpful. So the stories that our minds build for us are not always true or helpful. And the difficulty we have is that we can't really switch our minds off. We can't say, "Oh, that's it. I'm going to stop thinking now for the rest of the afternoon. I've done my thinking. Thank you, mind. You're talking nonsense. I'm not going to listen to you." We can't do that. So if I asked you to not think of a polar bear for the next 30 seconds, even if you close your eyes now, to not look at my screen, not look at the polar bear I've got there, the image that's popping up in your head is that of a polar bear. And that's because you can't unthink what your mind does. So the minds will do weird and wonderful things, and we can't actually switch them off. So given that we can't switch them off, so I'm walking to a pub and my mind says, all your friends are smoking. You've got to go and smoke, Koula, because that's what all your friends do. I can't switch off that part of my mind. What can I do? Well, I can learn to distance from it. I can separate myself from me in the present moment and the rhetoric, the stories that my mind will tell me. And ACT gives people the tools to do that. It teaches people how to essentially be in the present moment and have their mind play in the background and tell them stories about smoking and who they used to be and who they want to be and so on. But actually, unless the stories are helpful to them, it kind of creates distance between the person and the story. And if you look at what Mark Twain said very many years ago, he's lived through some terrible things in life, some of which actually happened. And that's what our minds do, right? They create horror stories, catastrophes, things that might not happen. And yet we don't question them. We just accept them as true because that's what we do. We won't question our own propaganda. So ACT helps the person distance themselves from the stories and essentially talks to people about always having a choice. And whatever decision they make in life, there's always a choice. The choice is between getting hooked by your mind and what the story of the day is. You must smoke, you're a weak person, you'll never be able to give up, and so on. And that is likely, if you get hooked by that story, likely the chances are is that you will make a move away from the sort of life that you want to be living. Or you can notice a story, but unhook from it, just create some distance between you and what your mind is telling you, and then you're more likely to make a move towards the sort of life you want to be living. So acceptance and commitment therapy then works with the patient to give them some clarity as to what they actually want. This goes back to the point I made at the start, that you can't actually take people where they don't want to go. And then once they are clear where they want to go, it's about developing those tools that will help them not be self-sabotaged by their own mind on their journey towards health change. Really, really good technique, really, really good, really exciting to see it working with patients. Quite easy to pick up and get trained in. So yeah, that's my top favorite ACT. Yes, we do this. I don't know why I've got the slide twice. And then the final thing is motivational interviewing. Now, motivational interviewing has been around for very many years. It was designed by Miller and Rolnick, and it was designed in the field of addiction. So it's really quite pertinent in smoking, because it was designed for behaviors that people are likely to find really, really difficult, really unhelpful. And the basics behind motivational interviewing is that people generally are ambivalent about life. So I want to be fit, but I don't want to go to the gym. I want to fit in my smaller waist trousers, but I also want to eat that chocolate bar. I want to smoke, but then I want to also be healthier. So generally, people are ambivalent about a lot of health behaviors. Traditionally, ambivalence was seen as a bad thing. Oh, you're ambivalent. Oh, you're not clear in your head. But with MI, the idea is that ambivalence is a good thing, because if someone is ambivalent, you've got one way of going in and actually intervening and helping them change. So it's very patient-centered, but it's quite directive. So it's not about sitting and listening to patient stories. It is quite kind of giving guidance. Oops. And the key feature of motivational interviewing is that where people are ambivalent about change, they're likely to be resistant. So someone who is, for example, overweight, if you talk to them about losing weight, chances are that will get their backs up. The first response is, oh, but I'm not overweight. Oh, I'm not ready to lose weight. Oh, I'm not. It's the same with smoking. So if you talk about a behavior that people are going to find difficult and they're resistant about changing, going in and addressing it head on tends to get people's backs up. They switch off, no behavior change happens. With MI, you go in the other way. So you roll with resistance, and you'll see an example I've given you here of how you might kind of start those conversations. And you'll see it actually goes against what most people do most of the time. So when people present us with a situation that we think, well, this is just not right, what you're telling me. What do you mean? You smoke because it relaxes you and the social thing to do and everybody lives. That's nonsense. You want to say this to them, right? In motivational interviewing, you don't. You roll with the resistance. You actually invite them to tell you more about why they feel this way. And what happens, and it's absolutely beautiful to watch this happen in practice, if you let people talk about the good things about the behavior they're ambivalent about, which is bad for them, like smoking, they talk and talk and talk, and then they run out. They run out of good things to tell you about smoking in this case. And then they tip into the ambivalence. Well, yeah, I do enjoy smoking, but gosh, it costs a lot of money. And then they have made the change, and then you go in to explore that, but you haven't actually confronted them and got them to talk about change. Absolutely beautiful. There are videos on YouTube on precisely how to do that. So MI is a good way to talk about giving up smoking with people. Again, you can't do MI in one session. You've got to be trained. So if you're not quite sure, do seek advice. So these are my 3+1 tools. So CBT, ACT, MI, and the behavior change technique that we talked about earlier. But I just wanted to close by saying that behavior change is difficult. You know, if it was easy, we'd all be super healthy and fit and happy and wonderful all the time. It's difficult. It's not easy. And perhaps in behaviors as complex as smoking cessation, what we need to do is move away from our naturally preferred go-to methods of giving information and sometimes increasing people's fear. We have to be more sophisticated than that. We have to actually up our game as healthcare professionals. And luckily, there are the tools out there to do that. So there are behavior change techniques that you can use, and there's literature there on which ones to use with smoking, when, with what people, and so on. There is evidence that shows CBT, ACT, and motivational interviewing are also good tools that you can use. But like anything, do get advice before you engage with any of those. Talk to psychologists, talk to any behavioral scientist who's trained in those techniques, because they'll be able to guide you where to go and where not to go with those. So there are tools out there. Let's start using them, but let's use them wisely and intelligently. That's me done. Thank you.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for a wonderful and informative and very constructive presentation, Koula. It was very comprehensive and still very understandable and also entertaining. I think it was very helpful, in particular for those in the audience who themselves consult on behavioral change. Now, please feel free to put up your follow-up questions in the chat box. We will read them out to Koula and then she can reply. We have some minutes left before we'll close this webinar. I think we'll close it in 6 minutes or so. Meanwhile, I might ask you a couple of questions myself that came up during your presentation. You're obviously a very experienced advisor, having met clients with all kinds of challenges and problem behaviors. So I was wondering, are some behaviors easier to change than others? And also related, are some personalities harder to engage with than others?
Yes, so some behaviors are much easier to change than others. So I've worked for a very long time. I used to work in dentistry and helping people to increase their brushing and flossing, much easier than getting people to change their diet or give up alcohol or indeed give up smoking. So the complexity of the behavior is paramount in how long it takes to change. And by definition, those behaviors that include a lot of other people, where there's social rewards when you emit them, where you've done them for a long time, where there's social norms that support them, they're harder to change than behaviors which you might engage with, you know, alone at home before you go to bed kind of thing, you know, brushing your teeth, for example. So yes, the complexity of the behavior will be a factor. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of personality, well, that is the bad news there, because we think that personalities are fairly fixed. So we don't, this is one area where we don't think psychologists can intervene. You know, if you're an extrovert, if you're an introvert, chances are there isn't much we can do to change that, we think. And yet some personalities they're harder to please. I wouldn't say necessarily harder to change, but they're harder to please. So people who are, as you know, there are 5 big personality types, one of which is neuroticism. In psychology, neuroticism means high social anxiety. So if you're really, really stressed about how other people see you, then you're high on neuroticism. So people who are high on neuroticism are generally unhappier patients, that they're harder to engage with, they're harder to keep happy, they're harder to deal with. So it could be said that behavior change might, I'm not saying yes, definitely, it might be a little bit harder with those that are higher on that scale than those who are lower. But the jury's out. There is no one personality where we say that's it, this person will never change. We're hopeful like that, that we can help people.
Okay, thank you. I was, you know, with smoking cessation, there's usually this ultimate goal of giving it all up. But, you know, the thought of not using the stimulant nicotine for the rest of your life is quite unbearable for some people. So switching to e-cigarettes is might appear easier. You know, giving up less. It's a small step. Kind of meeting people where they are. And also the advantage with e-cigarettes is that it might appeal to smokers not intending to quit. So I was wondering, what is your thoughts on e-cigarettes and smoking cessation? Does e-cigarettes have a place in smoking cessations? What do you think?
They do. And in fact, I was in the audience of a seminar on smoking cessation yesterday, and a colleague, an orthodontist, was presenting this Cochrane review that's apparently live. I need to get the reference for that, because I didn't get a minute to actually download it, but there's a live Cochrane review on e-cigarettes that's being updated as we speak, that has shown good evidence that actually e-cigarettes are actually helpful tools towards complete abstinence. But the idea is not new. You know, in psychology, when we try to change pretty much any behavior, we don't go straight. We hardly ever go straight in. You know, if someone is scared of heights, I'm not going to say, well, let's go over to Heathrow and catch an airplane and see how you cope with that. I'll probably spend time driving around Heathrow. I have done that many a time with people, then going into the airport and then going through to, you know, thinking about buying a ticket, then going through into the security area, then go through passport control. You gradually, we call this systematic desensitization. So you gradually desensitize a person from the behavior they find difficult, and in this case, the addictive behavior. So there's this track record behind why we would want to do this gradually and systematically. And in that sense, any tool that helps the person take gradual steps away from an addictive behavior is a good thing. It doesn't make sense to suggest that it isn't. And I appreciate there's, you know, policy and politics behind this, but purely from the science, the behavioral science point of view, it doesn't make sense not to go gradually. But yeah, this is just one view.
Okay, well, on that note, I think we will have to close this seminar. We have 30 seconds left, and I would like to use those 30 seconds to, again, thank you for a wonderful presentation. It was very comprehensive, and as I said, also very entertaining. So thank you for spending your time with us this afternoon, Koula, and I hope to see you sometime in the future. Thank you very much, and thank you all for watching this webinar on behalf of SCOHRE. Thanks.
For inviting me. Thank you. Take care.